Hey, Kathy, how are you?
I am well. How are you?
Good. I just wanted to bring up or discuss today and look at it from the course perspective, this whole area of unhappiness. And I'd just like to say, talk about, first of all, how this unhappiness uh, manifests itself, because we tend to think that unhappiness is caused by external events. That seems to be is our default position. I'm unhappy because my wife. I'm unhappy because I'm not making enough money. I'm unhappy because of what's happened in the past. And we assume that this is the case. That this it seems reasonable that that's the case. But when we look at it, like for example, um, have you noticed that in social life, there's a lot of people tend to be very critical and going on about how bad and how deficient and how defective people are. Have you noticed that?
Yes.
Yeah. Now,
A
so what
favorite
happens is this.
pastime.
Sorry.
Favorite pastime.
Yeah, and so there's an actual urge, an appetite to find fault. Now, Dr. Freud had an interesting thing about this that when you're criticizing and you're pointing outwards, I mean, the thing is that it's such a delicious feeling because you feel completely guilt-free, default fault-free. So, in other words, that feeling of self-condemnation, I'm just horrible, I'm bad, right? When you're actually seeing the badness out there and you're pointing your finger, there's a tremendous when you're really bitching on about someone and whatever, and there's a whole group of you talk, oh, I can't stand how that is. By the end of the session, you're just feeling omnipotently pure. Do you know what I mean? Compared to these idiots around you. But what Dr. Freud says that what you might think that you're complaining about the world, but in actual fact, you're dramatizing and defending yourself against a tremendous sense of guilt, a tremendous sense of self hatred. So that's the first
Yes.
phenomenon. We see people attacking and finding fault with other people. The second phenomena is, have you also noticed that human beings tend to attack each other? But they talk behind their back, they assess, like what St. Thomas Aquinas said, he talked about the sin of whispering, where you seek to deprive people of the friendship of others. Have you seen that type of thing, the character assassination? Do you know the envy, the rivalry, the jealousy, the malice? But it's all done with an innocent face, of course. Do you know what I mean? But the fact that the fact that we have a desire to hurt indicates there's a tremendous hurt because hurt people hurt. When you feel hurt, you want to attack back. So we see the manifestations of hurt all the time. People who are hurting are not necessarily aware of the hurt. They're aware
Right.
of the
Yes.
desire to attack, like the desire to criticize and condemn and complain. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And then we look at another phenomena of the whole thing of being bigger and better and more perfect than other people on a comparative basis, to be a good look in our own eyes and the eyes of other people. We strive to be a good look. That's why we promote. That's why we brag. That's why we've got grandiose ideas about what we're going to achieve. What's the compulsion behind that? The psychologist Alfred Adler made a big deal about that, and he called it an inferiority complex. That there's this drive for power and status is to overcome a tremendous feeling that there's something deficient in me. And lastly, when we look at our culture, the desire for stimulation, to fill up an emptiness, whether it's through drugs, through electronic media, having to always be stimulated, because if we're not stimulated and occupied, that a feeling of emptiness, that bleakness starts to come, that boredom, oh, the scariness of it. So what we're
Mhm.
looking at is that when we look at human life honestly, there seems to be a problem centered on ourselves. There's something wrong. There's something wrong. We don't know what it is. We think that it's something external. It's my wife, it's my economic circumstances, the fact that I'm getting old, all of these things that we think. yet there seems to be a tremendous unhappiness centered on us, but it's universally denied. That's why you get all this positive stuff, you got to be positive and stuff like that. Of course, it's so scary that even to even acknowledge the pain of it, even though when we go home at night and we stop presenting to ourselves and other people, and we get that empty kind of feeling, you know what I mean? That this a sense of disquiet, which we can turn off by watching TV, by taking drugs. Do you know what I mean? But there seems to be a universal problem. And what I find interesting about the course is that the course seeks to solve or resolve this universal problem that's actually centered on us. It's not centered on external things. There's something here, there's a problem, and we don't know what the nature of it is.
Right.
Could you speak to that?
Yes. So, um, as you say, we all have within ourselves some pain, what I would refer to as pain, terror, and guilt. And we experience those things periodically, usually in the world only when something seems to antagonize us and bring it into awareness. And so we spend our lives addressing what we think are external problems. That person is the problem, that circumstance is the problem, and we seek to get rid of the things we think are causing us pain. One of the things we do, which you said, is we complain about each other and we criticize. And in our efforts to see guilt in someone else, because the strain of our own sense of guilt, self-hatred, and terror is so great that we are forced to deny it because we can't. It's an intolerable situation for us to. So what is denied is projected automatically, and so we live in a world where we have so many opportunities to project out.
So I'm not
The
I'm not at fault.
Yeah.
Everything else over there is at fault.
Yes, I'm not miserable because of anything I chose. I'm miserable because of my external circumstances. And if I get rid of something out there, I will feel better. And so maybe it even seems to work because it definitely seems like something outside of us can act on us and hurt us. It does seem that way. So
Yeah,
it doesn't
well, yeah,
seem crazy to get rid of it.
right. So I just want to just ask you about the terror thing. I'm aware of the fact that I'm 70 years old, right? So in terms of my biological destiny, I'm going to be facing what we call old age, sickness, and death. And so the fear of ending, the fear of annihilation, which is like a sword of Damocles, that Greek god, they had the sword sitting on his head and it could drop any time.
Mm.
It is true that I've noticed in my life fear can come up, but it's a fear of being destroyed. Is that the terror that you're talking about?
Yes. Well, the terror, the way that I think definitely the way it plays out in our lives in the world could be the fear of any type of injury and death and
Hmm.
just being annihilated, like you said,
Hmm.
whether, it's physical pain or total annihilation. But that I think that is a cover for a deeper, a deeper terror, which is this idea that we are guilty and we're going to be punished. And so if we can see guilt outside of us, it alleviates that idea that we're going to be punished. But I think, yeah, what we all think experience those types of fears, and what the course talks about is how things are backwards and upside down in this world, and it's our real what we really have is an attraction to death, and because of what we've denied within ourselves, we experience it as a fear.
Right.
But
So go.
I would reference really probably the metaphysical chart just to see a snapshot of what we would call the unholy instant, which gave rise to the terror within us, which in the world is experienced as something external.
Yeah.
But
Now
that's
that
not the cause.
Yeah. Now this is a very interesting point because the key, from what I can understand, is the key idea in the course is that we have a belief that we're separate and apart from God. We have a belief in that. And out of that belief comes an entire world that is separate and apart from God.
Yes.
And we believe that, and because of that, like what you say, because of that, by having that belief, we can't help but first of all be miserable in ourselves because we're cut off from the love that is God. So the misery,
Yeah.
we're bubbling with misery, even though we may not be conscious of it. And we're also tremendously afraid of annihilation, to be punished, to be destroyed because of our badness. So this is,
Yeah.
and so in terms of the course, am I right in understanding that this is a problem that we're unconscious of? We don't know, when you're upset with your wife, you're not going to go, well, what I'm really upset about is that I'm actually cut off from love. That because I'm cut off from love, I'm unbelievably miserable, and also I'm fearing punishment for what I've done. Do you know what I mean? I would not. I won't see that this argument I'm having, this disturbance that I'm having with my wife, actually is a manifestation of this fundamental belief that I'm separate and apart from God.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm separate and apart from God, the unhappiness that's now manifesting with me fighting with my wife,
Mm-hmm.
that's the real meaning of my upset. It's the upset isn't with my wife. It is the
Right.
upset that's centered on the fact that I believe I'm separate from God, that I
Mm-hmm.
believe that being separate from God is that not only have I done a bad thing, I am a bad thing, and that I deserve punish for it. That's the course understanding. But what we say in the course is that 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 meaning of my problem is
Mm-hmm.
entirely unconscious. Even though it's manifesting as my upset and my wish to attack my spouse because she's said or done something I don't want, I like,
Right.
the fact is that I'm completely unconscious, that I'm dramatizing that fundamental problem, that I'm separate and apart, I'm miserable and bad, and I'm going to get punished for it. That I'm not even aware of. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm mindlessly believing that the problem is with someone else. And they
Yes.
have a
I
saying
think
they have a saying in the course, I'm never upset for the reason I think. So can you just talk about that, please? Because I think I
yes.
know what one thing that I'm absolutely sure of, Kathy, is I know what I'm upset about. It's that,
Yes.
it's
Yes.
that, it's that. I'm completely convinced that I
Right.
know what I'm upset
I
about.
I know what I need to get rid of to be happy. So yes, I think it's true. To really to experience those words, I'm never upset for the reason I think. I think we could go to the text to see some of the other things he says about our condition as being a body in a world and separate, which is if you can be upset by anything, you see your own concealed desire to kill. So that isn't something that we're aware of or could really even embrace as part of our overall identity. But we can understand it through being led there by an understanding. Okay, I'm going to back up a little because the first thing we have to do is see all of our attempts to fix things, what we think is wrong with other
Mhm.
people, with circumstance, are going to fail. So I think in order to turn around and
Oh, you're
think
being
about
so
things
negative.
differently,
You're being so negative.
yeah, once we spend, um, you know, uh, a lifetime, which we all do, trying to fix things out in the world by getting rid of people, circumstances, avoiding things, using all of our tricks. Once we see that those aren't going to work, because all that will happen is another problem will come up, another person will come up. So when we start to look at that and question it, maybe things aren't the way that I think they are. Maybe I'm not upset for the reason I think. The course says problems were in the world, problems cannot be solved because there'll just be another problem. That is a moment where you can turn to, maybe I'm not upset for the reason I think, and be willing to go down that road. So until then, we're going to keep doing exactly the same thing, trying to solve every problem in the world at the level of the world and never even consider I'm not upset for the reason I think. What
Well,
my true goal is.
Yeah, that's interesting because you see, it seems as if you see if my problems are external to me, then I have if that the meaning of my suffering is external things, I have to become a control freak and try to deal with it.
Yep,
Can't
and
help
that's
it.
what we all do.
And
Yeah.
no matter what we do, even when we settle that problem, another external. So
Mhm.
this idea of being victimized by the world, that the world is cool. I'm not saying that the world bad things don't happen and stuff like that, but
Mhm.
our
Mhm.
suffering about the world.
Right.
Well, I take it that what you're saying is that our suffering about the world is not actually the world. We think it's the world, therefore we obsess about the world because we think that the world is a source of happiness or unhappiness. That's our fundamental premise of our life. But what you're
Yes,
saying
it's
is that
designed to
that fundamental premise, if that is not challenged, we're just going to continue the same old problems, the same old upsets, the same old difficulties. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's absolutely it. And the quote I was trying to think of was, "The world was made so problems could not be escaped." So, if we continuously look outside of ourselves for the source of our upset, for the source of our discomfort, our depression, our misery, pain, fear, um, that is a never-ending cycle. So the world was made so problems couldn't be escaped. So we would be so preoccupied with it that we would never look away from it, look within, consider another cause. So we want to see there's a part of us that wants to see the world as a cause, because it maintains the self that we believe we are. It maintains our own, it's the way we buy our innocence by somebody else through someone else's guilt. And so we're trying to keep this life, this world we created intact. And the only way to do that is to be so preoccupied with the world, see the problem outside of ourselves, and never look away from it. If we look away from it, we might see a different cause, and we might see um, a, a a different path than the pathways of the world, and we don't want to. It's like the dreamer that wants to stay asleep, so you incorporate the truth into the dream. Um, I don't want to
Right,
go
so
too far.
so what so we so here we are. We Preoccupation is such a normal thing. Everyone's on their mobile phones. Like the thing is that when we're distracted, when we're absorbed, if you like, we
Yeah,
completely forget life in a sense, but we at least ward it off. Like it's like people who are older and they just watch TV all day. The fear of death is, when they're distracted, the fear of death, for example, what they're really feeling inside, they don't feel because they're absorbed in an external event. And so the course has a very interesting thing that I found very interesting is that the only way that I can have existence is by being separate and at least in my mind being separate and apart from God. So that's the very
hmm,
it's impossible to be separate and apart from God. However,
yeah,
I can imagine that I am, and the truth of God now becomes a danger to my very existence because if I became aware of the presence of God and the allness of God, I would disappear as a special, outstanding individual who's standing out and having a life of their own. So we're
yeah.
actually not afraid. We're actually afraid of coming to the understanding that there's something about our suffering and pain that we are willing. We won't go into why we're willing it, but that it's
Mhm.
willful that we want to be ourselves as separate and apart from God. And in order to do that, we've got to keep God away because
Yes.
in the presence of God, we disappear as a separate and apart individual. And so that fear of annihilation, we think it's the fear of death. But in fact, what we're really afraid of, because if the fact that I can die proves that I exist,
Yes. Yes.
so we're actually
Yes. It's all,
attracted. So, according to the Course, we're actually unconsciously attracted to death because it gives the ultimate thing. Yes, I'm real because if I die, I've proven the fact that I am
right.
real.
I'm right and God's wrong. I'm right and Jesus's course is wrong. If I die, and that's what we're really trying to do. We want, the problem to be with everybody out there, because it proves we're right. We're right about everything. And we exist, which is behind that thought, is that we exist. So all pain is a willingness to be separate. And um, just to kind of go back to that one line, in your suffering of any kind, you see your own concealed desire to kill. The way we can understand that is we seek to kill the truth in us. We don't want to
Right.
acknowledge the truth in us. We want to look, we don't want to look within and see the face of Christ. We want to look within, and we want to cling to our judgments and our grievances and prove that we're right about what I am, what the world is, and what God is.
Now that's interesting, because we see in our everyday life, sometimes we don't want to see the truth. It's antagonistic to us, because particularly if I've got certain nice notions about myself that protect me from this fundamental problem that we're talking about, and then suddenly I see that maybe I'm bragging a little bit, and that's not a very pleasant experience. Like, I'm bragging. Oh my goodness, right? So, but the fact of the matter is, because that goes against my flattering pictures of myself that I use to preserve my sense of existence. So it's true.
Yeah.
Truth is offensive to me. I can say, "Oh, I want to know the truth, and I want goodness and love and all of this stuff," and yet
Mhm.
when it comes down to it, there's often I will choose against the good and do what I want, even though I know that it's wrong. I will do it. So I I see. I get what you're saying. I mean,
Yeah.
that 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 there's something in us that when we say brag, there's something in us. There's something that's measuring us. This goodness that's measuring us and saying that's sort of not quite right. It's a bit lying. It's not honest. And there's something in us that doesn't like it. But the so what we're saying here today is that when I lose a sense of being accepting and um, being peaceful, I experience what we call suffering, right? But
Mhm.
from the course's point of view, that suffering is a dream of exile. So that when I'm upset with my spouse, right here, right now as I am, I'm dreaming.
Mhm.
And that dream of exile is taking the form of me feeling that I'm being victimized by her or by him, right?
Mhm.
And that dreaming we want to wake up from.
Yes. So what we're really saying is, I'm not a mind who has denied the truth, love, oneness, and myself. I'm a body in a world, and the cause of my pain is not that denial, it's that person over there. And so, the Course's path is to retrace our steps. And like you said earlier, withdraw our projection of what we believe upset us, and be willing to see it differently.
So fundamentally, unless there's a shift where if I don't come to a realization that the problem is centered on me and my own willfulness. Do you know what I mean? That my willfulness
Right.
to have my actual willing to have a life separate and apart from God. If I don't arrive at that point, my problems will never be resolved.
That's right. We'll be puppets. We'll just be puppets on a string, forgetting that we have a mind that can choose again and can see cause differently and effect differently. And so, part of, I think, the miracle is reminding the mind that what it sees is false, looks on devastation. Number one, we have to see we are devastated. The Course's goal isn't to make us devastated, but to raise into awareness we already are devastated. This isn't making us happy. It's all a tribute to our littleness. Whether I see myself and as a brag about myself, or see myself as high, or see myself as low, it's all a tribute to the littleness of being a body. And somewhere inside of us, we do feel the pain of that self betrayal. And so, what the Course does is remind us that we have a mind, so that it can be reminded that what it looks on is false.
Right. So ultimately, as we've talked about before, we have this idea that we're at home in God, dreaming of exile. So
Yes.
basically, the end of the process that we're very interested in is irrespective of what is happening, to
Yeah.
have a sense while we're in this life of being at home in God, so we're no longer dreaming the dream of conflict, of fighting, of attack, of emptiness, that kind of thing. Is that would be so? Because you see, if I was at home in love,
Hmm.
I would not have past grievances. I wouldn't have catastrophic expectations, and I'd have no self-hatred in the present, would I?
No, it would be you without any pain, fear, or guilt.
Right, which is actually, and this way of being in the world is the possibility that the course opens up, isn't it?
Yes, it absolutely. And I think that one thing that's important is the idea of discernment. If you can do something peacefully, if you're doing it with Jesus or the Holy Spirit and you can do it peacefully, then you're on the right track. And if you're upset, something's gone wrong, and then you stop.
I
You
think
look
what
at
we'll
that.
do when we next talk, we'll talk about that very important thing that what we're always our experience that we're facing is an outward picture of an inward condition, and that is always the rule. And I think it would be a good place to start next time because either that experience is telling us that we're on the wrong track, or
Hmm.
it's telling us that we're on the right track.
Yes.
So that if we're
Yes.
being peaceful and accepting, we're on the right track. But if we're in friction and fighting and struggling and desperate, we're on the
Hmm.
wrong track.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Kathy. That was an interesting little talk.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll see you next week. Bye bye.
Okay. Bye bye.